Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joel St. John, and this is my colleague, Nicholas Giegel. And we're security consultants with a company called ISEC Partners, based out of the United States in their Seattle office. And we're here today to talk all about cheating in online games. So, a bit of an agenda. We're going to go into some of the history of cheating in games and how it's developed over the years. We're going to talk a little bit about the current state of the arms race between cheaters and the anti-cheat software that's designed to prevent it. We're going to talk a little bit about where we see the future of cheating going. From there, we're actually going to talk about some vulnerabilities that we've found in anti-cheat software. And then finally, we're going to talk about some potential solutions to these problems and how to maybe prevent them going forward. All right. But first, let's talk a little bit about money. So as the gaming industry has developed, it's turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry over the past few decades. Developers in this space make money in several different ways. One of the most popular being the monthly subscription model that you see in some of the massively multiplayer online games. In addition to this, we actually have professional gamers that are making a considerable amount of money now through international tournaments, through streaming on sites like YouTube and Twitch, and that's generally through advertisement and corporate sponsorship. Finally, in some of these games, we've actually seen a rise of a kind of a gray market where virtual items, currency, account, anything can be sold for real-world money. This has actually become a pretty profitable space in some of the more popular games. All right, so that's really one of the big reasons why some of this stuff actually matters. But let's take a look at how cheating is going to affect it. So first, just to sort of get some common ground, what do we define as cheating? So we generally think of this as somehow gaining an unfair advantage against the other players in the game. And this can take a few different forms. The first one here, abusing game logic in one way or another. For instance, you could use multiple accounts to play the game at the same time and get an advantage that way. You can actually create bots or scripts that will automate some of the more repetitive parts in a game. Or you can actually take advantage of some of the extra client-side data that is present in some different genres, such as first-person shooters. It's also possible to find bugs or glitches in the system to actually let you exploit the client, server, or maybe other players. But for the purposes of this talk, we're really focusing on the first category here. So the abusing of game logic. All right, so a bit of a brief history of cheating. In early single-player computer games, cheating as simple as actually patching the code or the source or the application. And it's actually pretty similar with modern games because, at the end of the day, who really cares if you cheat in a single-player game, right? A lot of developers have actually created cheat codes in their games that basically allows a player to go ahead and cheat, at their own discretion. As multiplayer games began to emerge, however, cheating really became a large issue. But as time has gone on, they've actually learned to cope to the point where while cheaters still exist, they're at least not as rampant as they were, about a decade or two ago. As we were talking about the money aspect of things, this cheating can actually have real consequences in these games due to the large amount of money involved. A successful cheat can actually be sold to different players, and it can also impact the gamers that are making a living off of playing the game at the professional level. All right, so why don't we talk a little bit about some real-world examples? So one of the most common or popular ways to cheat in different games are what we consider speed or movement hacks. And so these are sort of broadly defined as moving outside how the game intends you to. So this could be moving faster than normal, it could be teleporting around, maybe flying through the sky. It can take a lot of different forms in different genres of games. In other games, we see what we, I guess, broadly call scripting here, that you can use to, script specific actions in the game so that you can actually play it at a higher skill level than you might normally be able to. So combining several actions at once so that you have to press one key, for instance. Also, we actually, from the beginning, we've seen a big problem with botting. So in a lot of these games, you can actually collect resources or currency through some really repetitive ways, and bots allow you to automate that process. You can leave them running for hours at a time, and they will just accumulate that for you. Oh man, that's kind of dark, but some of you might recognize that game. So a botter might, for instance, travel around a map and go to these different ore spawns to gather ore. They'll just do that for hours on end, collect as much as they can, then they'll go and they'll sell that for the in-game currency, and then that in turn can actually be sold through those virtual gray markets and turned into real-world money. So definitely, a big issue, undermines the players that actually want to play the game. From there, we also have player or item finding hacks that are, I think, most common in some first-person shooters. So the next one we have here is a survival horror game. And this one, if you die in this game, it's permanent death. Items are very hard to come by. You're constantly trying to stay alive. And this hack actually will find all of the items that have been sent to your client. So your client has the data on where these are, and this just highlights them so you know exactly where they are. It's not pictured in here, but it actually works for other players as well. And so you can use that to sneak up on other people and kill them and take their stuff. In addition to this, we also have some things like wall hacks or X-ray mods, and these let you see through terrain in general. That's a way to describe it. So it's kind of similar to the one we were just talking about. But here for an example, if some of you are familiar with Minecraft, this is what the game typically looks like. So we've got a player in a cave here. There's stone, there's ore, all that great and good. But once you install one of these X-ray hacks, we've got a player here on the surface, and they've just wiped away everything that's not interesting to them. So in this case, maybe they want to know where all the ore is. In some different modes, maybe they're trying to find chests that belong to other players to raid their bases or something like that. So all of this information is being sent to the client, and so we can leverage it at our discretion, right? All right. Over the years, to help combat against the people cheating in these games, we've actually seen the rise of a lot of different anti-cheat suites. So one of the more popular ones with the Blizzard series of games, I think it started with World of Warcraft, but it's I think in most of their games now. It's called the Warden, developed in 2004. In several of the Valve series of games, we have the Valve Anti-Cheat, or VAC, and that's used in, for instance, the Counter-Strike series, Team Fortress 2, among others. We'd actually see some completely third-party anti-cheat engines. So, for instance, BattlEye is one of the ones that can be integrated with whatever game you want, but I think it's most commonly known for the Arma series and the DayZ mod for that, and the standalone now. And these all have some similar qualities. So for one, they all tend to run in userland. So there's not a kernel component in there, though some of the anti-cheats do leverage things in kernel space. They tend to be very reactive. So they'll find out about a cheat, they'll figure out how to detect it, and then they'll push that detection mechanism out to their clients. Clients get detected, they get banned. They're also all really only meant to be a mitigation. They want to stop as many cheaters as possible, but comprehensively stopping them is not really something that they consider possible in this model. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about where the current state of cheating in games is, and I'm actually going to pass it over to Nico here to talk about it a little bit.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, cool. So now that Joel has shown you what the cheats currently look like, we're going to take a look at how they're actually implemented, and then we'll look into how anti-cheats catch them, and then we will take it just one step further and look at how we can prevent the anti-cheats from figuring out that somebody's cheating. So the cheats usually, they fall into one of three categories. You have the internal cheats, the external cheats, and the network ones. So the most common one is probably the one leveraging DLL injection. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with DLL injection on Windows. It's the usual, map some memory, create remote thread, load the DLL, and everything. So these cheats come in two parts. You have a loader, and the cheat itself, the cheat logic, is implemented in the DLL. So, the loader loads the cheat DLL into the game. And then, of course, the cheat logic then has full access for read and write to the entire, game address space. So pretty much anything goes. in order to display usually like a little menu. A lot of these cheats actually have menus, so you can select what you want to do. They hook direct 3D calls, and that's pretty much it, really. Another thing is the network packet manipulation. So these ones actually are a little less common. One thing that they do, for instance, they can introduce artificial lag. So if you're playing an FPS, things are just really quick. If the cheat delays or blocks or just drops the packets that sends your position from the client that the client is legitimately trying to send to the server, then all of a sudden to your opponents, your character looks like it's teleporting if it's displaying at all. Repeat packets. So you grab a packet, let's say, depending on the integrity level, the integrity checking that's done at the server level, these might or might not be possible. But let's say that there is I don't know, damage packet. You're sending, 10 damage to whatever player. Well, you repeat that packet, you get, a lot of damage. Or directly modify the packets directly and change whatever you can. Finally, there's external cheating. It is believed that external cheats have been developed in an attempt to hide from early anti-cheats because, well, as the name suggests, they're not in process. They're not in the game process. It's actually a separate process. And so they access the game memory by using read process memory, write process memory, which is ends up generating a system call on Windows, which is actually terrible for performance. But we're assuming that at some point it was able to go unnoticed by the anti-cheats at the time. Now not so much, as we'll see in the next slide. And in order to render things to the player, they usually create a transparent window on top of the game window so that you can see, remember the little ESP like extrasensory or extrasensorial perception. Remember the shooter that we were showing you guys. So they do that via a transparent window instead of directly hooking the direct 3D calls as in the internal cheats. So that's pretty much it for the cheating in games. The current state of the cheats is generally like they generally fall in one of these three categories. So anti-cheats, well, what do? So they kind of follow an antivirus model, and sometimes they have components that are loaded directly into the game process. Often they have a service running a system, but essentially what they will do is scan game process the game process first and foremost in order to find known signatures for cheats, again, just like an antivirus would. And then they have some game-specific checks. For instance, when you have games, a lot of games have like a little scripting engine within, so they can scan for cheats that are related to that. Hook detection. So now this gets a little bit interesting. Because the current arm race between cheats and anti-cheat is, remember, like the internal cheats, the most common ones, they hook DirectX calls, right? So let's say that usually the way that the pointer chain looks like is that you have a C++ object and you have a member that is also a C++ object and so on and so forth with vtables all over the place. So the way they hook it is they replace one of the vtables and to point to a vtable that will call their stuff. So you hook at a certain level and then the anti-cheat comes in and expects, this vtable, this pointer to be modified, and then they detect it. So then what do the cheats, do? Well, they say, okay, let's hook a little bit earlier, let's hook a little bit later. So that's kind of like the arm race going on. So what the anti-cheats do now is they actually pick up, kind of a sort of as early as possible in the game code, and then they just, parse the whole pointer chain to try to find a modification. It's similar to the Windows mitigation known as SE-hop for structured exception handling, if you guys are familiar with that. Then also another one that's interesting is the call stacks periodic checks. So what this does is, the anti-cheat, the anti-cheat will wait for one of the game threads to be either sleeping or otherwise non-active, maybe got preempted and whatnot. But it will basically go through the stack and try to find a malicious stack, well, a cheat stack, a known cheat stack. So that's also something that's pretty advanced compared to just blunt signature checking. So that's pretty nice. Then there's like debug-related detections, right? Some cheats have been known to kind of hide their marks by leveraging, XCC, interrupt 3, like debug mechanisms and things like that. Actually, these debug-related detections are, their purpose is twofold. One is to prevent this kind of things, and two is to hinder the development of cheats. Because if you have the game process running and you put your breakpoint, it doesn't get hit, it's annoying. So that's something. And then out of process, well, actually, it's like all the processes. So in order to detect external cheats, then they scan, all the processes and try to find interesting things. Same thing, signature detection. Some will go as far as actually checking memory sections that are not mapped as DLLs, because that's how they hide. All the things that might be scanning for in other processes is handles, right? Remember the external cheat. They're calling read process memory, write process memory all the time to update, whatever data structure they're interested in and everything. So for that, you need a handle to the process. So that's something they scan for. That's it. Oh, and the couple of things that we're listing here. This is not an exhaustive list. I mean, there's just a lot of things, but this covers, most of it. Things that have been kind of controversial due to privacy issues. Some anti-cheats will actually scan files on your disk, and then they will send it to their servers for further analysis. Most of it's probably automated, but I'm sure at some point it probably becomes manual. Anyway, that's kind of creepy. Then check DNS history for cheat updates. Oh yeah, so because there's like a constant arm race between the cheats and the anti-cheats, anti-cheats sellers, cheat sellers, cheat people who just, make and sell cheats, constantly have to update their software. And they do that by using, update servers. Because one of the cheats gets detected, then they go and, make a new one. So for that, the anti-cheats, have picked up on that. And so they're saying, okay, let's check the DNS history to see the requests have been made. And, oh, this is a known cheat server, ban that player. Or cheat update server, let's ban that player. So that's it for the anti-cheats. So as you've noticed, most of these techniques, if not all these techniques, actually kind of start with the idea that the anti-cheat has the ability to open up any process, see what's in there, open up files, and everything, which actually is an assumption that just should not be made when you're a user mode component and the user actually has control over his machine. So what we're proposing is something that will be a lot harder to pick up for anti-cheats, which is a rootkit-like functionality to hide a cheat activity. So how does this work? Well, two parts, a kernel driver and a user mode executable. Writing a cheat completely in kernel, that's possible. It's just, well, if not annoying, it's probably, well, yeah, it's just it'd be annoying. I mean, it's doable, but so there's no need for that. So basically, the actual cheat logic will be implemented in user mode, just like a regular cheat, and the driver will do a few things and will provide a few services to the user mode portion of the cheat to hide it completely from the techniques we mentioned before. So the kernel driver, what does it do? So the first thing it'll do is that it will make the user mode portion a protected process. Now, protected processes are this feature in Windows that was introduced in Vista, I believe, in order to help DRM enforcement. I mean, there are other ways that you could hide a process. I mean, rootkits, have been doing that for decades, right? You could remove, NT keeps a list of all the processes. You could just remove it from the doubly linked list. You could have callbacks that are used by antiviruses. But we figured, this only takes flipping one bit on the eProcess block. So that sounded simple enough, so we went that way. Flip the bit, and all of a sudden the process is protected. So even if you have an anti-cheat running a system and it tries to open up the process, it gets access denied. So now the interesting part of the driver, what it will do is that the user mode executable will actually be, right, it's not a DLL, it's actually an executable. So it'll run as a separate process. So in order to access the game memory in a covert way, so the driver will provide this mapping mechanism. Well, it will actually get a request from the user mode portion of the cheat, and it will map directly page frames it will map memory from the game process into the cheat process. The driver will do that. Another thing that would do is that actually we haven't actually merged that in, but essentially to prevent the having a file, basically the anti-cheat, pick up files from your hard drive and you could and send it to a server. You could just install that filter driver that we have that will put a filter device on the file system stack and return file not found when it's getting a request. We actually haven't had a need to implement that, but that's further work, I guess. So the user mode executable, like I said before, implements the cheat logic, and it keeps track of the game cheat mappings, right? This is actually not completely necessary, but it's just a performance improvement because once the memory is mapped into the cheat process, you don't want to have to, there's no need to call the driver again to say remap this memory, right? Because every time it's a system call. So for performance, you just keep track of it. You can just implement that logic in user mode as we have. So here's the way it looks. So this is how when your CPU is executing the game, and basically this memory, OX42000, I'm not sure you guys can read. So this is like game data that, let's say, the cheat is interested in, right? So when the CPU is running, the page tables they're abstracted. This is not what page tables look like, but this basically shows that they provide the translation between virtual memory and physical memory. So you see that when the game is trying to access this virtual memory up there, then the MMU will do the translation based on the page tables before the read or write request is sent on the bus, and it will actually map to, let's say, a page frame FDF, right? So what will happen once the cheat calls into the driver is this. So the cheat virtual memory will be mapping to the exact same physical memory. So this is completely transparent. It will be very fast because the hardware does the work. So basically, it's accessing game memory as if it were its own. So it's very fast and pretty covered. So how is this done? So we'll show you guys the brief code snippet. I'm not going to bore you with that too much, but the idea is that these APIs are documented and they're public. So there's nothing like too crazy here. The first thing that you'll notice, the first line, PS lookup process by process ID. So this will basically find the game process. The second thing is allocate MDL. So an MDL, if you guys are not familiar with this, is this partially opaque structure. You can find the full description on MSDN. And what it does is it basically is a think of it as a list of page frames. It describes like a range of physical memory. That's essentially what it is. So now the interesting system calls, I mean, not system calls, we're in kernel here. This is what running in the driver. The interesting calls here are KE stack attach process, because what this will do is will actually grab your thread. So we're talking about the driver thread, that's handling the octal sent from the cheat client. And it will jump this thread into the address space of the game. And so once this has succeeded, then the for memory management initialize MDL will take as parameter, see the base address. The second parameter is actually the virtual address in the game that we're interested in, and it will basically fill the MDL with the page frames that are actually mapped there. So remember the FDF that identifies this. Then when you call KE and stack detach process, then you come back into the cheat process, and then you call map lock page specify cache, which will map, and then you get basically that. And then basically unlock the pages, free some memory, and do some reference counting so the driver doesn't blue screen on you, and you're good to go. That's now your memory. So we have a little demo, really briefly, to demonstrate this, and hopefully it works. So we're going to map memory of this awesome game called Notepad. So this is Notepad right here. Where's my mouse? Okay. So this is Notepad right here, and all right. So you see here. So I can't really see. Can you guys tell me when I hit notepad.demo?
Yeah,
is that it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Is that handles? I can't see. All right. So as you can see, there's no handle. And there's no handle to the notepad process. And then when you type here, hello, then it shows up down there without anything. So basically the memory is dual mapped, and you can see it in here. And just to show that you can also write to it, what was it again? Let me see your, tell me if there's a typo, huh?
I think the O needs to be capitalized.
Oh, yes, it does. Whoops. Okay, so you can also write to the memory and from under the game's feet, and it won't notice a difference. It'll just override it completely. So, thank you. So that's the. Oh yeah, hang on, I gotta get out of the VM. Okay. So that's done. So pros and cons. So the strength of this method is that it's completely generic, right? You can do it to any game because it provides, unlimited access to the game in a complete covered way, to the game memory, read, write. It's fast, so you can apply it to just anything, any type of game. It will not matter. This is not specific. It's virtually undetectable from user mode. As you guys can imagine, you just have a process stuck into a driver. This process is protected. The file you cannot access. It's not going to happen. I mean, anti-cheats are going to have a hard time. So one thing about this method that is interesting is that there's actually a bunch of publicly available cheat sources online. The problem with these public sources is that obviously they're public, so anti-cheats know of them and they can detect them. So with this, what you can do is simply grab a public source, modify the calls to, let's say, an external cheat, modify the source to change from using read process memory, write process memory. You change them by calling the driver or calling whatever little memory management you have going in user mode, and that's it. You get an undetectable cheat. So that's pretty nice. And as I mentioned before, it's got pretty good performance because simply there's nothing. I mean, there's no system call. There's nothing to do. It's your memory. Have fun. So weaknesses, well, it's in kernel mode, so it is as strong or as weak as anything else running in kernel mode. So if you have an anti-cheat that makes its way to kernel, then you have a problem. Now, as we've seen with antiviruses, until the machine got locked down with various mechanisms, kernel mode battles usually end up with the winner being whoever loads first. So, but at least it have a shot at it. Another thing that would be a minor inconvenience would be that, of course, you have to run in debug mode or you have to get your driver signed, which is actually not a big deal, but it's not as easy as just running some executable. Okay, so this is it for the cheating framework. Now we are going to take it just one step, beyond that, and we're going to show you guys that we actually attacked the anti-cheat software itself. So anti-cheat libraries are actually very interesting because they provide an additional attack surface. The interesting thing about this attack surface is that it's going to be running on the client, it's going to be running on the server, and it's going to be running across multiple games. So if I were an exploit developer, business-wise, this looks like a good target because if you pop a vuln in a game, then you can just attack that game. If you have a vulnerability in an anti-cheat software, you can use it across a bunch of games. So you just have immediately a broader audience. So what happens when there's a problem? Well, let's take a look at BattleEye. So BattleEye is, as we discussed before, an anti-cheat. So the way it works is that you have a global server that is used to keep track of bans and things like that, and then you have a server DLL that's running in the game server, and then you have a client DLL that's running in the game client. So far, it's expected, right? Now, one thing interesting about it is that it actually hooks, the way that they communicate is they piggyback on the already established communication between the game client and the game server, which is usually UDP. And so they hook a receive or receive from type of call, and then they basically parse the packets to figure out whether they're intended for the game itself or they're intended for the BattleEye logic. So the way they differentiate the packets is based off the packet structure, right? So the first 2 bytes are just B and E as a signature, and then you have like a hash, and then a length that is also occasionally used as a code, and then that's it for the metadata, and the rest is basically data for the server to process, the BattleEye server to process. So here's the first thing that we noticed. Also, just one thing I'd like to specify: we did not do like a full pen test on this. It's just that as we were researching, cheats and anti-cheats, we just happened to like look a little bit into how this works, and we just noticed these. So this is not extensive. We didn't do fuzzing. We didn't do anything like that. These are just a couple of bugs that just happened. So this part is actually it's the part of the packet parsing. So if you see in the first box, the call to sub 10015430 is actually the hash check. So we actually had to reverse the hash function to get this code to accept our packet. But since we got it right, then it makes it down to the box to the left and then to the other box to the left. And then you'll see that ESI contains the head of the packet. It contains the start of the packet. And then you end up in the last box to the left, all the way down here. I think it might be cut a little bit, but hopefully you guys can see it. And if you can see it, then you'll notice that there is a move S6 instruction. The problem with this is that, well, there's an error in the code where this character is a signed value. And when they do the comparison, they basically do a move SX, which will sign extend it all the way into the 32-bit register ESI. So the magic value here is FC, which the last bit is a signed bit is set. But then you end up with FFFFFFFC, which is, if you look at it as an unsigned value, it's a really big number. If you look at it as a signed value, it's just a negative number, small negative number. But the problem then is the JGE. JGE is a signed comparison. So what they're trying to do here, they're trying to do an upper bound check. Except they're trying to do an upper bound check on a signed value. So our big unsigned value, which happens to be a small negative value, if you look at it as a signed, which is what they're doing, you will pass the check. So pass the check, and then you end up a couple of function calls later down here. So our bogus value, our bogus FFFFFFC value, ends up in EDI. So EDI plus 4, you end up with 0, and then you call the C++ new operator, which in turn will call a malloc. You call malloc with 0, you get a really small allocation. Once you have a really small allocation, then, well, which succeeds, then you make your way to the left. Well, actually, that's the only box there is. So you make your way to the other box, and then they add to our 0 value, which was stored in EBP plus 4. If you can see, it's the third line in the top box. So then they pick it up again, which is interesting. The compiler would do that, but whatever. So you end up with EBP plus 4 and in ECX, and then they remove 7. And the problem is you end up with that 7. You end up with, again, a really big value, FFFFFFF, minus 6. And then that's what they use to do the mem copy. So the result of this bug is that you get a really small allocation on heap, and then you get basically a 4 gig copy. As you can imagine, this crashes. So exploitability of this. Denial of service is trivial, obviously. Just send FC and valid hash, and it'll blow up the server. This actually is already a problem because we're talking about gaming here, right? So let's say you have a game with permadeath, and you find yourself in a corner out of ammo, zombies and players, and everybody hates you. Well, magic packet, kill the server. That's convenient. Now, for the more juicy part, remote code execution. Well, it's possible. It'd be very tricky. I mean, nowadays, exploits take, I don't know, 2-3 bugs to get anything reliable, which we don't have for this. But this would be a good start because you're overriding heap data, and I forgot one thing. The thing that we're overriding the data with is actually attacker controlled. So that's also convenient. Now, it'd be very difficult. Few reasons for this. The first one is that the anti-cheat is actually, we're blowing up the anti-cheat heap, right? They're creating their own private heap. They're not using the process heap. That heap was actually pretty anorexic. I mean, there's not much on it, like no vtables, no function pointers, nothing really juicy. So we actually wrote this little PYKD script, which is very convenient. It'll just hook free, and every time a free happens in your process, then it will actually check to see if there's a vtable or anything interesting here. So that would be it. We found a couple of things. We found. What else did we find? Well, we found a couple of pointers, but anyway, another thing that would make this remote code execution very difficult is that you would actually have to race the thread that's performing the copy before it crashes the process. Difficult, not impossible. Now, there's a second vulnerability. Do you guys remember the little FF, at the very beginning? Maybe not. I don't know. I've been looking at this code too much, maybe. Well, if that little code happens to be an FF in the packet, that means you're trying to log into the admin console. And that leads to the second bug, which is in the admin console login. I'll leave it up to Joel.
All right, so the next bug here is actually a timing attack on the remote console login for BattleEye. So It's sort of two-part. In the first box, we've got the disassembly here for the login. And the first thing they do is actually check the length of the provided password against the length of the actual password. And if it doesn't match up, it just immediately bails out. And so as you can imagine, that's a pretty differing sort of function. And so we feed enough requests to that with different lengths, and then we can eventually figure out the length for the password. From that point, once we actually have the length, we get into a string comparison against the password. As you can see down here, what eventually happens is we get a call to string copy, and that's actually not a constant time operation. So we end up passing something like 500,000 attempts for each character that's possible in the password, and there's definitely a noticeable difference in the timing. And for this one, we actually have a demo as well, though it's just a video. There it is. And I think it might be a little hard to see, so I'm sorry about that. But all right, so what we've got going here is up in the left, we actually have the configuration file for the remote console login. We're using password safe to generate just a random 24-character password. And then we save it in the configuration file here. And then once we're done with that, we actually just launch the server using that password. That'll take just a moment. This is actually against Arma 2, but it would really apply to any of the BattlEye enabled games. So once that's going, it's been enabled using that password. And then we start our attack here, which is just a Python script. And so we've sped this up quite a bit. I think about, I don't know, 1,500% or something, so that we can actually present it here in good time. But it's a little bit hard to see, but it's just going through each character. It's again like 500,000 iterations for any character that can be used in a password. And we don't have the numbers up here, but there's a gap between the correct character and any of the other characters. And so you can see it's just slowly working its way through. I wish I could zoom that in, but yeah, I don't know. So we're at about 14. It'll take a few minutes here, but
how long did it take total?
So the attack from beginning to completion, it takes all of 17 minutes. So this is locally, but it could be pretty easily modified to work over the network. This was for just a proof of concept, the easiest way to do it. Once you start doing it over the network, it's going to take significantly more attempts, and so it would take a little bit longer, but it's definitely still possible. All right, so we've actually slowed down here. We've guessed 23 of the characters, and the actual BattlEye server up there, you see a new line. So once it found the right password, you can see the admin logged into the console, and now we've got the password. Yeah, like I said, it took all of 17 minutes. So
you can start kicking people and banning.
yeah, once you're in the console, yeah, you can kick people from the server. You can do all sorts of fun things from in there. But yeah, that's all for that one. So for both of these bugs, we found them in August of this year and reported them to the vendor in the same month. The first of the bugs has actually been fixed, and patch has been released, and which is great. And they're still working on patching the timing attack, but they definitely have that coming out soon, hopefully. So, all right. So, what do we think to be the future of anti-cheat? So, one option here is actually to move that arms race that we're talking about into kernel space. Problem is it's going to be incredibly tricky, and it's most definitely, again, not a comprehensive solution. And once you're working in that space, any problems there can, instead of getting an application bug, you end up with blue screen of death. So might be worth it. A second way is actually to get more of human factor. So players policing other players, giving them the option to actually report players in their games. And we're seeing more and more of that as newer games are released. And it's great because it gives the players sort of a means of self-regulation. And it turns out that people tend to be much better at catching cheaters than some of the automated processes. As far as full solution goes, there are a couple different ways that I guess the model in some of these genres can be changed to help prevent against these sort of attacks. One of these is actually the full streaming of games. Not quite there yet, but what we could do is we could have all of the game logic and everything going on a server, so on a trusted server that we have, and then basically feed a video stream to our player. The problem with this is that it would take an incredible amount of bandwidth, and we're just really not there yet. One other way is actually to move the platform to some sort of closed solution. So you can think of maybe something a little more like a gaming console, where the underlying hardware I don't necessarily control unless I open up that box and find some interesting bugs in there. But the problem with the open platform is that at the end of the day it's my hardware, and I can do with it what I will. But yeah, just potential solutions. Not sure if where all of that's going. But so I guess to conclude, at the end, what does this all mean? So we've sort of established that anti-cheat is definitely a mitigation at best. It's not going to stop all of the cheaters. It was never really intended to. We've established that anti-cheat actually creates additional attack surface, not just for the game server, but actually for the people playing the game. In addition to this, since the anti-cheat tends to run with escalated privileges, something running as system, a service, if you do find an exploit in there, the impact can be pretty severe to the players in particular, or I guess to the server.
Also, one thing that crossed our mind obviously is once you pop the server, then you can turn around and attack the clients. It'll take more bugs, but you can get a pretty instant botnet that way. So.
Yeah. We've also talked about how the current anti-cheat, it's actually possible to bypass it completely by taking it all to kernel space. It doesn't take that much code. It's all out there, and it's really just a matter of time before people start doing it. Finally, we think some real fundamental changes need to happen to the system because, as we talked about before, money is becoming more and more of a part of these online games, and as that incentive increases, we're going to get not only more cheaters, but definitely more sophisticated cheaters when they can move into this space and make quite a bit of money. All right, so that's about it. Wanted to say thank you to a couple people from our office, Rachel and Jason, for helping us through all of this, and then the two interns we have pictured here, definitely wanted to get them in. They actually helped us write the timing attack, and interns are people too, despite what some people say. And then yeah, just too many coworkers to list back at our Seattle office that have helped us build this talk into what it is today. But yeah, that's it. Any questions for us about how any of this works?
Yeah, you talked. I saw that you reversed the bottom line.
Uh-huh.
So you have the source code of the server?
No, it's closed source.
No, it's closed source.
I mean, you bot protection as.
Oh no, it's public. Oh, I know what you're asking. It's public. You go to their website, you can download the server and the client. It comes as a little DLL. It's actually pretty convenient. You have a game server, you just put the DLL on there, and that's there. So we figured we'd take a look.
And another question. You talked about hiding your cheating program, like cheat engine and other programs. But what about the anti-cheat mechanisms that use the kernel to hide or to protect the memory of the game itself?
So at that point, like we were talking before, it becomes a game sort of similar to the antivirus space, where it's who loaded first. And when you're a cheater, you can basically always ensure that your kernel driver loads first. And so it's definitely trickier to do something like that. But
think of it as the antivirus race, except the user is on the virus side.
yeah, that's sort of what it boils down to. In the back there?
Yeah, you can do that. Problem there is graphics.
Yeah, performance, really.
But once this gets solved, yeah, it'll open up like a whole new area, exactly like rootkits and viruses before. It follows really the same pattern. But yes, that would definitely do the trick. If you can run your game more than 10 frames per second, yes.
So, I mean, in terms of anti-cheat, most of the ones that we've actually looked at aren't really in the kernel space at all. We didn't have a chance to, I guess, comprehensively look at all of them. But I guess, again, getting back to, the fact that at the end of the day, even if they're working in kernel space, with enough work, we could still bypass them. So, sorry, what was the other half to your question? Okay, sorry. Anybody else? Yes?
When you move your code into the kernel,
I'm sorry?
your code is in the kernel.
Correct.
What stops my anti-cheat thing just saying notepad_demo.exe, I don't like that, you're cheating?
So we can hide it entirely. As far as the anti-cheat goes, it doesn't exist in the first place if you're operating in the kernel. Or you can hide it. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think,
Well,
I think
the,
that's where we go.
the way we did it originally is to make the process protected. With a DRM feature of modern Windows, we basically flip a bit on the data structure that represents the process in Windows kernel and NT, and then that process is now protected, and you just can't open it even if your system on the machine. But that's just one method. I mean, it's been done many times with either removing the process completely from the doubly linked list, or think of the anti-cheat really as being the virus, and the driver as being the antivirus. That has kind of control over it. You can just completely blind it. You can contain it. You can do anything you want. There's two different privilege levels. So,
Any other questions? All right. Well,
Great.
thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah,
Hope you
thank you.
enjoyed.